Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to talk about something that Chris Johnston had said today on Leafs Lunch, and then I want to propose a trade that I think would really work for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So on Leafs Lunch on Friday, Chris Johnston had mentioned that the Maple Leafs could be in the market for a defenseman to fill the void that Zach Bogosian left at the end of last season. For a lot of people, when it comes to Zach Bogosian, they really only cared about the fact that he was 6'2" and over 200 pounds, and had a willingness to drop the gloves and throw some hits and block some shots. But down the stretch for the Maple Leafs last season, he was able to be a very, very effective player for them on their bottom pair. And the injury that he had right before the playoffs started last year was really unfortunate, where he had an awkward collision with the boards and hurt his shoulder. And in that series against the Montreal Canadiens, I just don't think he was at 100%. But Steven, Zach Bogosian wasn't a top four defenseman for them. Like you said, he played an effective role for the Maple Leafs on their third pair. Well, I'm not abandoning or ignoring the clear need for a top four defenseman on this year's Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm also not interested in paying a first or a third round pick for what's available right now on the trade market. In the last couple of videos that we've done, taking a look at if guys like Ben Sherratt or Josh Manson could be a decent fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year, I keep coming back to this quote from Sheldon Keefe from the middle of January, where he talked about what Jake Muzzin has struggled with specifically this year, and that's making decisions with the puck. And the conclusion that I keep coming to is that if he's having trouble making decisions and moving the puck, it doesn't make sense to go out and acquire a guy like Sherratt or Manson or another guy to play in your top four that also struggles to carry the puck. I'm not interested in compounding the issue, and I'm also not necessarily interested in breaking up Morgan Rielly and TJ Brodie. In the recent stretch of games that Jake Muzzin missed due to a concussion, Rasmus Sandin really stepped up for the Maple Leafs and played an average of 20 and a half minutes a night for them. I apologize when I show sites like puckiq.com because there's just a lot on the screen and it's hard to make it visually appealing and easy to read. I'm trying with some arrows right now. But if we're looking at Rasmus Sandin over that 7-game sample, I don't have all of the numbers to work with. But in 4 out of those 7 games, Rasmus Sandin played a very, very heavy defensive first role. And in terms of the dangerous Fenwick 4 percentage relative to the rest of his teammates, and dangerous Fenwick 4 is the quality of unblocked shot attempts, he kind of got killed when playing against the other team's better players. And the reason I point that out is that maybe if you're not able to find an ideal partner to cover for the areas that Jake Muzzin has struggled in so far this year, maybe you're thinking to yourself, maybe a guy like Rasmus Sandin can step up, and he definitely doesn't have any trouble carrying the puck and making decisions with it. Like I said in my previous video, Rasmus Sandin made a play behind his own net where he was falling over last game, but still managed to poke the puck to a teammate, and the teammate was able to make a pass, and they were able to exit the zone with the possession last night. I'm not worried about him in that respect. I know that Kyle Dubas said that he wants to give Rasmus Sandin a little bit more of a runway between now and the trade deadline, and he has in Jake Muzzin's absence, but as far as taking over Jake Muzzin's role on the team this year, I don't necessarily think that he's ready for that just yet. I also don't necessarily want to count out a guy like Jake Muzzin because he's had his struggles this season, but he also hasn't been completely awful like a lot of people want to make it out to be. I mean, his decline this season is not from a slightly above average player to not very good. His decline this season is from one of the better two-way defensemen in the NHL to maybe not being able to carry the Maple Leafs shutdown pair at the age of 32 with some nagging injuries all by himself. And I don't necessarily think that that's totally unreasonable. I think it would benefit the Maple Leafs greatly to just have 3 good deep pairings that share the responsibility a little bit more, as opposed to Rielly Brodie, Jake Muzzin in the shutdown pair, and then Rasmus Sandin and whoever else in more of a sheltered role. I think that Rasmus Sandin is at the point in his development where He is ready to handle some more responsibility, and I think it's fair to say that Jake Muzzin is at the point in his career where maybe he could use a little bit less responsibility. And this is not me saying that they can't or won't or shouldn't acquire a top four defenseman to play next to Jake Muzzin. I'm just saying that if you're looking at what it would cost in terms of the assets that you would have to give up to what's available on the market, it may be best to raise the floor and spread the responsibility around a little bit, which would be good for Rasmus Sandin's development, than it would be to just continue relying on Jake Muzzin and somebody else to play against the other team's best players all the time. But getting to the trade that I want to propose here, I think Kyle Dubas's best trade that he's made so far as general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs is the one where he acquired Jack Campbell, because it didn't just address the team's need for a backup goaltender, it also netted them Kyle Clifford, who was part of a very effective fourth line for the Toronto Maple Leafs in that series against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, they still lost, but it addressed two needs in one trade. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that again with the Arizona Coyotes, with a guy like Ilya Lyubushkin and Lawson Crouse. Let me make my point and go through the information before you leave a comment at least. Ilya Lyubushkin's a right-handed shooting defenseman, 6'2", over 200 pounds, has played over 18 minutes a night for the Coyotes this season in a heavy defensive first role on a team that's not very great. He throws a lot of hits and blocks a lot of shots, though. He is going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season, but the best part about him, $1.35 million against the cap, and he should not cost you a first and a third round pick in this deal. He's primarily played with Jakob Chychrun this season, but he's also played a decent amount of minutes with several other players on the Coyotes, so we'll have a decent sample to work with in terms of his numbers with and without Jakob Chychrun. If we're looking at his numbers with and without Jakob Chychrun there, and you're seeing that he's actually played a lot more minutes without him than with him at 5-on-5 so far this year, the numbers actually improve in a larger defensive role. Now, this is where you have to be careful when using relative numbers when evaluating a player who's not playing on a very good team, and the Arizona Coyotes are not a very good team, because is he good relative to the rest of his teammates because he's good, or they're just that bad? Now, if we're looking at his numbers against elite competition this year, so the other team's best players, in terms of the shot attempt share relative to his teammates, he's actually pretty close to breaking even, playing a very heavy defensive first role for the Coyotes. But in terms of the dangerous Fenwick 4 relative to his teammates, the quality of the unblocked shot attempts, he is surrendering them at a higher volume. But I mean, relative to the rest of his teammates, he plays in a more difficult role. So I would expect that to be the case. Now, you also have to be careful when looking at how a team performs with and without a certain player on the ice, because you need to be able to contextualize that with the role that that player is playing and the role that the team is playing when he's not on the ice as well. I don't really care if a team is good defensively with a fourth liner out there who plays heavy offensive zone minutes. That's not really saying anything. But when you're considering that the Coyotes are a much better team defensively with him on the ice as opposed to without him, and that he is playing a prominent role for them, over 18 minutes a night against the other team's better players in a defensive first role, I think you can put some stock in this. Before we touch on Lawson Crouse, I want to remind people that just because Nick Ritchie didn't necessarily work out the way that we wanted him to, doesn't mean that the idea was bad. It just didn't work out. You know, clearly after that game against the Calgary Flames, there is a need for a type of player like Nick Ritchie on the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that player needs to be able to throw his weight around and also carry his weight at 5-on-5 as well. So when we see that Lawson Crouse is 6'4", 220 pounds, and will be 25 this summer and a restricted free agent, this is the main component of the deal. The Maple Leafs have said that they are willing to pay for players who have term remaining on their contract. He will need a new deal this summer, but He's not going to be a UFA for another 2 years after this one, so I'm willing to pony up to pay the price to acquire both Lawson Krause and Ilya Lyubushkin. He's got 22 points and 12 goals in 46 games this year, playing over 17 minutes a night for the Coyotes, and it's not in a sheltered offensive role either. You know, he's a physical player. He's a big player. He can add some scoring to a team that hasn't been able to score in the playoffs the last couple of years. A lot of his shots and a lot of his goals come from really in tight in front of the net. And as for who he bumps out of this already really good forward core that the Maple Leafs have, nobody. The best part about this deal is that by the time the trade deadline rolls around, the Maple Leafs will have about $1 million in cap space to work with if they continue to bank and save their cap space the way that they've been very diligently trying to do the last month or so. If you include a guy like Travis Dermott in this deal because you're acquiring Lyubushkin, another defenseman, it gets you up to about $2.5 million in cap space, and Lawson Krause and Ilya Lyubushkin together only cost $2.8 million. You get the Coyotes to retain a little bit on Lyubushkin because his contract's expiring at the end of this summer, and you can make the money work with only subtracting Travis Dermott off this roster. The Coyotes have already made it clear that they're willing to take on some contracts if they're compensated for it, so I think that they would be willing to retain a little bit in this deal. And if you're looking at Lawson Krause's with and without stats from this season, there's a lot of guys in red without him that are not scoring as much and also giving up a lot more defensively. And there's a lot more guys in gray that are either better defensively and scoring more or one or the other. He's having a damn good season. And if you look at where his shots have come from this year, a lot of them right in front of that net area where the Maple Leafs, again, have been better this season, but need to continue to be better in order to be successful in the playoffs. If you're still worried about who would come out of the lineup for a guy like Lawson Krause because you like the Maple Leafs forward core the way that it is, that's not the point. The point is that you would have everyone still available to you come time for playoffs. You would even still have Nick Ritchie in this scenario. That's just depth. Now, there is a possibility that the Coyotes would not want to deal Lawson Krause, but it seems like everybody on the Coyotes is available these days for the right price. I want the Toronto Maple Leafs to be better both offensively and defensively, but I also want them to become a little bit meaner and a little bit tougher to play against, and I think that a move like this does all three of those things. But as always, what are your thoughts and opinions? Let me know down in the comment section down below, and if you liked the video, make sure to leave it a like, and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, we're going to continue to talk about more options, so don't worry if this isn't your preferred one. Like I said, it's not the only one, it's not the best one, but it's a pretty damn good one.